Good evening, and let me welcome you all to this final session of this year's edition of Ideas Lab, hosted by the Center for European Policy Studies, CEPS. Well, I know this was a long day, so thanks for being with us, and we've been discussing from the very morning all the main challenges that Europe faces today. And what we're going to try to do now, we are going to wrap up and we are going to have this concluding discussion to basically map the possibilities for peace and prosperity for all Europe. And we wanted to be here future-oriented and forward-looking, and to do this, this session will be very special, and it will center stage the young voices from Europe and beyond. So we are joined today by brilliant young thinkers, 30 of them, who are with us. I'm sure you already met them. They were very engaged in all the sessions that we're running today. Just to give you a bit of a background, so it's the second year that CEPS is running CEPS Young Thinkers initiative to bring and to center stage young voices into the high-level policy debates. It's the second year to devote this special session for the young voices, and we're very happy to have them here and to keep this initiative running. I am Tina Ahmediani, just call me Tina. I'm research fellow, and I'm also leading CEPS Young Thinkers initiative, and in this role, I will just moderate for this session for the next hour. Well, I said we will be forward-looking, and this will be also a special occasion to have the first opportunity to learn about the upcoming priorities of the upcoming Czech presidency in the Council of the European Union. And we are very delighted to be joined by Mr. Stefan Czerny, Director General for European Affairs of the Government Office of Czech Republic. He will give us the keynote speech, and he will share with us, exclusively with us, the upcoming agenda of the new presidency. And then Mr. Czerny will be joined by the panel of young thinkers, who will be the first ones to comment on the new priorities. But well, basically, we didn't want to leave Mr. Czerny alone with all these questions, so we've also asked our Director of Research, Steven Blockmans, to join us and to be with us. Thanks a lot, Steven, for being with us, even though he already had 2 sessions today. And then in my role as the moderator, I'll try my best to reserve the final 10 to 15 minutes for collecting the questions from the audience. So we have quite busy agenda ahead, and without further ado, let me invite Stefan Czerny for the keynote speech. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to join you here. I understand you had a full day, full agenda today. Well, same for me. I just came back from the European Council, but I will try to enlighten you a bit about the upcoming Czech presidency of the Council. Of course, in a way, I know that everybody who's some way connected to Brussels knows the presidency priorities. It's the general exercise every half a year. The presidency priorities are put forward in a paper. They're usually 3 of them. They're usually somehow related to the idea of solidarity and sustainability and digital and green transition, all the buzzwords you hear around in Brussels, even if these buzzwords are, of course, full of content. But the presidency, as it is right now, to a certain degree, it's a, rotational presidency. Every 6 years you do the same thing. You have to restart all the processes once again, but on the other hand, it's a process which gives some input from the member states to the Council. Of course, in the EU, you have this balance or disbalance of institutions with the Parliament and the Commission and the Council. The Council presidency is a really weird animal in a certain way. After Lisbon Treaty, the Council presidency deals with the different sectoral agendas, but there's no Council presidency for the Prime Minister, who is my political boss. So when we were preparing the Czech presidency since 2018, it was always a difficult sell to the politicians above us, telling them, well, but I will not chair any council meeting. I will not chair the European Council. So what's there for me? It's like you civil servants, you diplomats, you do your stuff, you do your digital and green transition, you do your trialogues, you do your general approaches and the meetings with the Parliament and then the conferences and informal councils. But what's there as a political topic? What's happening there? What can we actually influence? How can we change the world with our presidency? It was a difficult question for us as civil servants to answer for the politicians who are our bosses. But then we were doing some exercises. Of course, we had a new government in December, but elections happen all the time, so that's something we civil servants are pretty much used to. That's the risk of the job, that every 4 years you can get new people who just need to learn what's the Council and what's the European Parliament and why are these people commissioners and why are they not named in another way, and who's responsible for what, and who will deal with what. So we had new government since December, and we did some brainstorming with them, what priorities should we put forward, whether the traditional one for Czech Republic, like single market, or migration or climate change or digital transition or some very general ideas such as democratic values and things like rule of law, which is very important but very technical and very heavily politicized. But then on 24th of February, unfortunately, an event which was not really foreseen in our presidency planning happened, and it's the Russian aggression in Ukraine, which definitely totally changed the way we are looking at the presidency right now. Of course, there is a crisis almost all the time in the EU. There's COVID crisis, and there's Brexit, and there was a banking crisis, and there was a Eurozone crisis, it's a migration crisis. But war in Ukraine is definitely a totally different kind of crisis. It's a war on the borders of Europe, of the EU. It's an actual war. This is not a civil war, not an insurrection or anything like that. It's an actual, let's say, conventional war with lots of damage being done, and it totally changed the way we are looking at the presidency right now. We've basically put the paper we were preparing in the dustbin, recycled everything, and we focus now on Ukraine as a key topic in many aspects, but I will try to illustrate in which aspects will our presidency tackle this issue. It's not that we are there to solve the Ukraine crisis or the war in Ukraine, definitely not the ambition of our presidency, but necessarily we will need to steer the debate in the EU, in the Council, in the right direction so that this war is stopped and we can have a better situation for Ukraine. What's within the brackets of our presidency? We are now on sort of 5, we call them baskets. It's a word which works in Czech but doesn't work in English, but 5 baskets of topics. First basket, Ukraine as such has 3 elements within it. How do we manage to stop the war? Because that's necessary to stop the war, but the peace has to be long-lasting and the peace has to be in some sort of way honorable. We will be supporting Ukraine as a member state. We are supporting Ukraine as the EU via macro-financial assistance, different tools. We are supporting Ukraine by imposing sanctions on Russia and Russian assets and Russian exports to the EU. What we are also trying to do is to support Ukraine in longer term, because once the war is over or ceasefire is there, Ukraine will need to be rebuilt, and this will be a task for the Czech presidency to see 2 tools how Ukraine can be rebuilt. Of course, that comes the European perspective of Ukraine. That's very important for us. The candidate status for Ukraine regarding EU accession, that's very important and very dear to the Prime Minister of Czech Republic. A high political ambition, of course, a difficult one. I'm not mincing my words, but it's very high on the agenda as well. Third element within the Ukraine bracket is the refugees. Maybe you know, maybe you don't know, we are the country of 10.7 million people. Czech Republic got some 300,000 new citizens over the course of 5 weeks. So basically increase our population by 3%. That's significant. That's a higher proportion than migration crisis 2015 and 16. That's definitely something to be tackled. These people are there to stay. These people are there to become citizens of the EU, citizens of Czech Republic, of Poland, or any kind of country where they are. And we need to make sure that we know how to integrate them in our societies and how to make their life in our societies better. Another consequence of that, and that's the second basket, is the energy security. Of course, we are talking about Fit for 55 and 2030, 2050 ambition, but within that is the question how we will make sure that we can fuel and heat our homes next winter. Definitely, high energy prices are putting a lot of strain on inflation, on the cost of living of people in Europe. I'm afraid that at some point maybe the tendency of the politicians will be to say, okay, 2030, 2050, that's too far away. We need to make sure that people have enough coal or gas or whatever to put into their stoves over the winter when it's not as nice and the weather is as it is today. We will try to solve that. We try to look into that. How can the climate ambition of Europe can be managed in a way that we don't freeze over the next winter and the winter after that. Third element is, of course, security and defense. How to make sure that Europe has enough means to defend their interest in our immediate neighborhood, how to make sure that we have military but also rather softer power capacities to defend our interests internally, so that when they are put under pressure by disinformation campaign, by cyber attacks, by propaganda, that we have enough tools how to tackle these. Of course, this is a bit controversial because the EU is not a military alliance, but EU will have to in some way find means how to define and how to have resources to become a stronger actor in international arena. All our partners are asking us to do so. The US, the other like-minded countries are asking us to do so, and it's necessary to stand up to the challenge. Fourth area is the economy, resilience of European economy. We cannot really achieve any sort of stable situation in Europe if our economies are as unstable as there are now. We have high inflation rates all around Europe, inflation rates which we haven't really seen since 1990s in our case, maybe for past 50 years in other member states. It's definitely necessary to look on how our supply chains are organized, how they can be made more sustainable, how we can make them shorter, how we can make trade with people and countries which are aligned to our values and are not a threat to the security of the EU. Of course, now the sanctions debate about coal and then later on about oil is a symptom of that we are too much relying on the fact that globalization will work for the time being, and it's not really the case in some areas. Fifth basket, which is maybe not as specific but very important as well, is the resilience of democratic institutions. We know that democracy and our values enshrined in the Treaty on EU are the key, and it's the community of values which is the EU. Of course, single market, everything like that is important, but the community values is very important as well. And these values are under threat, and these values have to be defended, and the way how to defend it is to make the democratic institutions, such as the justice, the court system, the elections, the free media, how to make them stronger and how to find European ways how to support them. Of course, what's in there, of course, to make sure that we understand the concept of war crimes, the concept of free judiciary, the concept of how do we align ourselves with the sanctions regime in the same way, and these are some elements for this fifth package of priorities. So this is a maybe a bit unconventional way how to approach the presidency priorities, but this is something which our political leaders and our broader civil service is fully aligned with, and I'm very happy to interact with you and to get some feedback from you on these points. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stefan. We very much appreciate this possibility that you exclusively are sharing with us the upcoming priorities. Let me just for the audience summarize. So the Ukraine with its war refugees, post-war recovery, energy security, European defense and security, strategic resilience of European economy, and resilience of democratic institutions. And I just want to flag here that these are very much the topics that we've been discussing today. I think this really resonates and quite well sums up all the sessions we had today. And I'm sure there will be a lot of comments and questions from the audience, and mostly from our young thinkers who are just patiently waiting for me to open the panel. So let me just name their names. So today we are joined here by Kira Murphy, Stella Meyer, Selin Kumbarace, and Georgi Uhurgunashvili. Let me start by opening the panel by going to them in the basically order of the priorities mentioned by our keynote speaker. So let me start with Kira. So Kira is working now for the European Migration Network based in Ireland. She was conducting research on Irish response and on Irish and European response to Ukrainian refugees. But we could already spot in the keynote speech that there is a lot of interest, right, on the European perspective for Ukraine. And we saw today there was a lot of questions on how the enlargement should be, what to do with the candidacy status. So maybe I would come to you to particularly share your take on this particular issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes, as Tina pointed out, it would be more logical for me to reflect on the migration, but when we talked about it with colleagues, it was really the question of enlargement and accession that was really interesting. It's clearly a key strategy of the EU and EU leaders and the Czech presidency in responding to this crisis. But as there's been a lot of conversation, there's a lot of concerns. There were concerns previously about enlargement of the EU, in particular the need for reforms both within the EU and in the institutions, and the resilience of those institutions to enlargement, and within new accession countries, which of course has been a major kind of stalling issue for the candidate countries at the moment, as well as kind of some pushback from certain governments as well as citizens, which we see has changed potentially, but kind of the sustainability of that change as when kind of we get into the post-crisis period, as well as geopolitical consequences of kind of expanding eastward, and the existential question. It's Dawn. The existential question that it poses for the EU, as you know, as you mentioned, where it's not a military alliance, but it using accession in this point implies that there is a security dimension to EU membership. There's been a lot of interesting discussions around staged accession, around different ways of approaching this issue. CEPS has done some very interesting research where it kind of thrashed out what staged accession could look like. So I think what we would like to know is what this enlargement could look like, what accession could look like, and if this might be the moment to start broaching stage accession in both kind of looking at and what would mean for the accession process, but also potential institutional reform within the EU.
Stefan, to you. Yeah, let's start with you.
Thank you very much for the question. It's very, very pertinent for a Czech person who only joined the EU 18 years ago. So we've been through all the accession and enlargement process, and what we've learned is that's the actual process which makes the country more stable. The candidate status is more of a symbol. Of course, it opens some doors to some extra funding, but in case of Ukraine, this is probably not the main reason they are in there. Of course, on the other hand, it's true that the accession process in our case involved a lot of reforms such as land register reform and judicial reform, media market reform, and to be that Ukraine in a stage of war is probably not really, doesn't have really enough resources to go through a painful reform of the land register while they are fighting Russian aggression in the east. So what we're aiming at is definitely to confirm the candidate status as a first step towards potential membership, which I have no really, not a crystal ball in my hands. I think that the accession of Ukraine will take some time, and because that's the process which is there to make the country much closer to us. On staged accession, I don't think that we can use the word as such, but the ways how to make Ukraine more integrated with the EU, that's definitely something to look into. They're basically on the single market. They are almost on the free movement of people. They're quite integrated in the energy market, so how to make sure that they are integrated in all the policies, that they are willing to be integrated in order to really understand what does EU membership entail in reality, that the EU is not another international organization such as the WTO or OECD. That's actually a different kind of international work. So that's really, we're really looking into that as well.
Sure, and maybe you should come to Stephen.
Yeah, thanks. I would like to add a few thoughts, and not just to plug the staged accession template, but if you look at it from the other way around, one of the great lessons of the Brexit drama has in fact been that relegating, at least for the EU, that relegating the fine legal, financial, regulatory, operational detail on common arrangements ranging from customs, Northern Ireland, fishing rights, etc. By relegating those type of negotiations to a body, working groups of the council here in Brussels, and leave that to faceless technocrats, you avoid actually from being those issues being politicized and potentially from spiraling out of control. There's no need for gunboat diplomacy off the shores of Guernsey and Jersey. There is no need to risk the Northern Irish peace process. And so at heart, and this is a cliche to say, but true, I think, strategically speaking, the security dimension of the European integration project is the spread of peace. And this is, of course, where Ukraine comes in very prominently. Everyone realizes that even extending the prospect of a candidate country status in June, which would be absolutely morally the right thing to do, will not result in opening accession talks anytime soon. There'll be a sequencing of priorities, of course, finding a political solution to the conflict, reconstruction, rehabilitation of society, and only then, when the institutions are ready, basically start a staged accession process, which would bring online much earlier than it is currently in the binary in or out type of methodology of the enlargement process, the kind of benefits which are needed to plug the socioeconomic gap in which not just Ukraine, but the Western Balkans have been stuck for so long. Montenegro has been negotiating accession for 10 years now. Serbia has been doing so for 8 years and has been sliding back on rule of law and democracy. North Macedonia has been held at arm's length for 17 years. This process or this methodology is not working and needs to be reformed. The revised methodology of 2020 is insufficient in that respect. And so the idea of sectoral integration is, I think, a good one. and should be conditioned in a step-by-step approach where member states help in supporting reforms and monitoring them together with the European Commission in a much more evidence-based manner, so as to bring extra funding online, which the frugal states will have to be convinced does not go into the wrong pockets. So heavy conditionality and the possibility of reversibility also when countries like Serbia at the moment backslide. So there is merit to the idea, but the inherent premise in your question as to the strategic orientation of the enlargement process is and remains, and this is where Ukraine has reminded us fundamentally the spread of peace and prosperity throughout the continent.
Thanks a lot. I think it's a very good summary about the enlargement, but I know it's very difficult to close temporarily this big discussion, but let's just stop it just only for the moment. Later on we can discuss it further, the questions from the audience. Just also for the audience, let me flag that staged accession that Kira referred to and Stephen has gave us more details can be found on CEPS website. It's one of our publications, so you can learn more about it. Now let's go on with the energy security. So, and let me go to Celine Kumbaracci. So Celine is a Fulbright scholar and MA student at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, and she is focusing on energy and climate. So let me briefly ask you, what are your takes? I think from Stefan, we have not learned that much, right? Stefan was rather short, but I think there is a lot going on energy security. We have a lot of new documents from the Commission, Repower EU, sanctions, transitioning from the Russian dependence. So what is your take on all this? What is missing? Maybe you can tell us.
Sure, you can hear me? Yeah. So I think you mentioned as well in your speech how important it is to reconcile these two aims of energy security and decarbonization. Of course, energy security will need to move forward in a much more immediate time frame, whereas decarbonization, as again you mentioned, is a longer term concern. And in reconciling these two goals, I guess this is where my take comes in, flexibility will be very important. There's not going to be one-size-fits-all approach for every single EU member state. However, while flexibility is important, a high degree of coordination will also be critical between EU member states. And this will especially be very important to making sure that fossil fuels are not locked in the long term due to hefty infrastructural investments, for example, while also taking care to ensure that much more immediately energy security can be strengthened as soon as possible. And of course, I think it would not be too controversial to say long-term European strategy would be very useful in this sort of situation. And in my opinion, I see this as where Repower EU comes in, especially with its energy supply diversification, as well as with the renewable deployment acceleration. However, it will depend a lot on national states and coordination between them because of the nature of many of the measures that are there. And I'm sure everyone would appreciate that this sort of coordination and unity is not so simply achieved. And these challenges lead to some questions on my end regarding whether Repower EU is sufficient, whether there needs to be a different approach in order to reconcile these dual aims of energy security and decarbonization, and whether cooperation between member states will even be sufficient in order for these policies to successfully materialize on the ground. But I guess I would phrase my question to you overall in terms of how the Czech presidency will leverage its position in order to improve coordination between member states, as well as to further the reconciliation between energy security and decarbonization, perhaps by tweaking the Repower EU strategy, or perhaps through different means. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, I'm a Czech person, so we know what's our energy mix. I very much agree with you that one size fits all is not really a suitable approach in this way. Well, we have a long-term strategy. By 2050, we'll be carbon neutral. By 2050, well, even myself, I'm maybe at the end of my professional career, so it's a very long-term strategy, and we don't really know all the steps on the way. What we have on the rather medium term is 2030 goals. So definitely there's Fit for 55 package, which was, I would say, a groundbreaking achievement by the European Commission. The fact that we have a commitment to reduce our, that we have commitment by the European Council to reduce our emissions, and we have tools how to do that in rather short term. So what we are now seeing, and we are supporting the French presidency in this respect, to do most of the heavy lifting in the Council before the end of their presidency, so that we can jump on the trilogue thing. Well, I promised everybody I will not use the word trilogue too often, so this is maybe last time. So we'll jump on the trilogues as early as we can. So we have the midterm strategy sorted out, and we can have enough leeway, enough political will on our hands for us to be able to really look into the next winter. I think that, yeah, Fit for 55 was designed such a way to make fossil fuels a bit more expensive so that people don't use them much and use alternatives. But I think that now with the price of gas and Russian aggression and the way the Russians are using the fossil fuels as a weapon, it's a bit too expensive right now, and I think that's one step ahead. So naturally there is a reaction by a couple of member states to look into the electricity market, whether there are good incentives there. I think the necessary task for our presidency will be to manage these debates so that they just like don't lead to a total breakout of 27 national energy markets, 27 national energy policies, with state aid flowing to who shouts the most loudly, let's put it this way, in a way how to also make sure that social costs are tackled. Well, of course, if your price tag for your heating has tripled or quadrupled, or what's the other word, so it becomes five times bigger, then you probably stop being worried about 2030 and 2050 goals, and you just like, you're going to vote for the person who says that your bill will be cheaper next winter. And if the person says your bill will be cheaper if you just stop supporting Ukraine, that's a problem for the unity of the EU. So there is a security and there is a geopolitical element in that as well. Repower, of course, that's a good step ahead. I'm glad that they can actually, that there is a realization that these two are not necessarily in contradiction. And it's also necessary to say that diversification and the radical derussification, that's not a word in English, right? But the phasing out of Russian fossil fuels, they will in the end contribute to our climate ambition, to our climate goals.
Many thanks. Stefan, let's just move on as we are restricted in time, if that's okay by Stephen. But we are very much looking forward, so active coordination by Czech presidency trialogues and midterm strategy, some things to look forward. And let's move on the European security and defense. So Stefan mentioned that EU should be stronger actor in that. And let me go with the question to Georgi Uhur-Gunashvili. He is a master's student at the College of Europe, Natolin campus, and I'm aware that Georgi specializes in European security and mostly also with the focus on cybersecurity, right, Georgi? So maybe you can cover these areas and tell us how you see you being a stronger actor in this field.
Well, thank you. Mostly, I would say hybrid, generally, a point of my interest. Since the EU, through its strategic compass, has declared ambition to enhance its resilience against the hybrid threats, which includes, on the one hand, fighting the disinformation campaigns, and also forging the strategic narrative, which could reach out over its borders. And on the other hand, withstanding the malign interference requires also a stronger, closer cooperation in cyber to raise cyber security capabilities of the member states. And since the Czech Republic traditionally, domestically, has a valuable experience in both disinformation and cyber domains, the question is, first of all, how can the EU come up with this single strategic narrative? And also, is it a priority to expand existing toolkits like the EU Stratcom or the hybrid fusion, could be also the hybrid Center of Excellence in Finland, Helsinki. And finally, are there any plans for increased systemic cooperation with the Eastern partners in the neighborhood, namely Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia, in both cyber and disinformation domains? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, the cybersecurity, it's a very difficult and very technical field. So in a way, it's of course necessary to understand that the cyber warfare is another operational domain of security. That's very important to see the security domain not only as the tanks or whatever military weapons you can touch, but also things that you cannot really touch, which can have even higher impacts. Cyber attacks happen all the time. Suspiciously, after the 24th of February, there's a bit more of them. So that's very interesting to see this connection. What's important, I think, that for the Czech presidency is to build up a sort of a convergence of strategic cultures. That's a very technical terms, but I think in our case it will mean that the EU27, every member state, all the policymakers, they understand who are our rivals and who are our allies in the world. Of course, it's not cut in stone. There are like interests and our values can shift over time, and it's a geopolitical arena, it's a shifting world. But on the other hand, we need to make sure that we all share the same views about who the ally is and who the ally is not. And in the way, it will be much better, much easier to mobilize all the resources we need, especially in strategic communication, finding strategic narratives. Of course, here not one size fits all approach will work because we are still 27 member states, 27 national societies. But if we try to work on the convergence of strategic cultures, that will help us to at least identify what the government and what the civil societies and all the actors, the educational system and academia should approach and should address, and what are the areas which we should not really address and which we should maybe leave to the general population to learn about themselves.
Working?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I mean, the strategic compass, of course, sets a few concrete goals in this respect. You mentioned to the foreign interference toolbox. I mean, the whole document is awash with commitments to build new toolboxes or expand them. A foreign information and manipulation and interference toolbox would encompass all kinds of initiatives, basically. Both in the security and defense sphere proper, to enhance situational awareness, basically, for CSDP operations. The EU advisory mission to Ukraine might already help with that. I think what is most important in the first instance is, however, to collect the data and to analyze them collectively. And there, the institutions that you mentioned, of course, could assist member states in coordinating their enhanced understanding, and to conduct specific dialogues and cooperation with Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, to benefit also from their insights and experience, or indeed intelligence. In a concrete way, in the security and defense realm, there's the possibility, of course, to dock these third countries also to existing PESCO projects, that permanent structure cooperation projects in the area of defense, if and when they meet the strategic objectives and strict criteria which are set by the Council, of course. But I think there the European Union would benefit certainly from a battle-hardened Ukraine in the cybersphere, to beef up its own defenses. So the EU, I think, could do more still in thinking about the mobilization of that type of experience and expertise to its own benefit and that of its like-minded neighboring countries.
Thank you, Stephen. I think these are really good ideas how you could address with the third countries who are very much interested in coming closer to the EU with the security. And with this, let us move on to the next topic, and which is economic resilience. And Stefan has mentioned that there is indeed a lot going on right now, given the current ongoing war in Ukraine. And we are also seeing, Stefan mentioned, the high inflation in certain countries. Let's be precise. I have Baltic countries in mind in particular. And probably, the audience could think there are big challenges, but perhaps there are the ways we could turn these big challenges into the opportunities. And some of the ways is probably to discuss what could we do from the digital perspectives when discussing the economic resilience of the European Union. And we have on board Stella Meyer, who is a communications director at Student Think Tank for Europe-Asia Relations. And she's also a recent graduate from Uppsala University, where she was was doing research on online disinformation and platform regulations. So maybe, Stella, you can give us some of your takes in this direction.
Thank you, Tina. So, yeah, you mentioned that investing in innovation and becoming a more powerful player in tech is one of your core ambitions. But there is a huge digital divide, not just globally, but also within Europe, between even highly developed countries like Germany and Sweden. In Germany, we weren't able to enforce the national vaccine mandate because we didn't have enough paper to inform all the citizens of the mandate. And in Sweden, that wouldn't have been an issue because everything is digitalized, and that just wouldn't have been an issue. So it seems national implementation of legislation is an issue, like the Data Act or the AI Act, and there is a danger of leaving countries behind who are struggling to catch up to today's technology, let alone that of tomorrow. So with the digital divide in mind, where do you see the biggest challenges in national implementation of tech legislation for technologically less developed countries? And then more importantly, what can be done to support these countries to overcome these difficulties? And then ultimately, obviously, closing the digital divide or aiming to close it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very... I think one of the challenges we are facing in this sphere is the maybe natural tendency which was there since the very first days of the first COVID wave to just like look into each other and engage in protectionist practices on the single market. So I think one of the challenges we are also facing in the EU is to not to perceive our efforts to better regulate the digital single market and better advance the digital single market as measures of protectionism against our global partners or allies or competitors. So in this way, I think one of the we still as Czechs, we are firm believers in the benefits of the single market. It's our main economic growth factor. It has created so many jobs in our country over the past 18 years that we really think that the digital single market should be there as a free market where all the different elements, all different actors in the market, be it companies or consumers or academia or innovators, they can compete with the ideas easily. But it's one element of the digital single market that it's not really frustrated by the physical barriers, and there's also internet is a global medium, so in a way it's a way how to really foster competition, how to really foster competition of ideas and of concepts and of design. Of course, the digital divide, well, it starts with investment infrastructure. That can be a challenge, that you don't have enough internet in the places where you live. On the other hand, COVID has really transformed our lives, made our digital overnight. We were able, and well, with some challenges and hiccups, we were able to transform our society to a teleworking society. Of course, now we appreciate the fact that we can meet in person, we can speak in person and meet each other. But on the other hand, now it's perfectly possible for a person to be driving on the train and attend a video conference, a meeting. That's like sci-fi 2.5 years ago, I'll be honest with you, at least in the Czech Republic. And nowadays, let's use these benefits. Let's use the fact that people were actually forced to learn how to use internet tools, and because there was no other option at the time, let's use this benefit to continue this newly acquired skill set so that we can actually become competitive on the single market, even in the digital arena.
Can I just add a footnote?
Sure, Steven.
In the context of the Recovery and Resilience Fund, of course, and you asked about support, what can the EU do for you? Well, the European Commission has basically asked member states for projects, concrete plans to close the digital divide, and of course also to invest in the green transition. And member states have come up with and have been screened, if you want, by the European Commission on those plans. So that's certainly one concrete way in which, going forward in the next few years, these divides could be closed.
Thanks a lot. I think we're being very efficient with the timing, and as we already used 2/3 of our session, let me reserve discussing of the final points that Stefan shared with us, which was resilience of democratic institutions, for the discussion with the audience. And let me, with this note, open the floor for the audience. The microphones will be on the two sides, so please raise your hands, introduce yourselves briefly, and be precise with your questions. Okay, to Nikita, I see here. On the second row.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your talk. Well, thanks to my fellow young thinkers. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to actually clarify something that you've stated, specifically the relationship between the two buckets that you've mentioned. So, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Nikita. I'm a master's student at the London School of Economics. I'm a young thinker. I was wondering, how does financial help towards countries that are coping with the inflows of refugees, the most affected ones, is going to be squared off against your commitment to democratic institution building? Because as we know, Poland and Hungary are among the ones that are most affected, and those nations, until very recently, have been in, well, rather big clashes with the EU on rule of law. So a very specific sub-question is, how would that impact the use of the conditionality mechanism? Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Gresa. I work for the Cooperation and Development Institute in Albania, specializing on connectivity agenda, the Balkans and the EU. My question is about the first part of the discussion maybe that we had. So the war in Ukraine once again proved the need for resilient and secure institutions. However, while a post-war reconstruction plan is being built, which, as discussed, will require largely financial reallocations. My question is, how will the Czech Republic keep in balance the financial investments for the Balkans, you know, which are part of the EU promise, let's say, for the future of the region, and here I think for like the economic investment plan for the Balkans or the revision of new TEN-T regulation and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Gresa. Maybe we can go ahead with these two questions, Stefan.
Thank you very much. Regarding the first question, it's tempting to see a dilemma here, but I don't think that there is a dilemma at all. I think the spending of EU money is heavily conditioned by the legal system that is out there. There's probably no way just to say that this is a different situation, so we can just jump through all loopholes and not really follow the legal requirements which are there. So of course, the flexibility and the mobilization of funds towards countries which are helping refugees should go hand in hand with the fact that the countries are fulfilling all the requirements that are out there. I think there's a slight distinction between the Hungarian and Polish case in terms of willingness and cooperative and language that the politicians are using, and I think this willingness is also reflected by the ones on the other side of the table who are discussing the distribution of the money. So I think that you can be assured that the conditionality will not be put into question by our presidency. That's for a fact. Secondly, regarding the Western Balkans and the reconstruction funding, well, when we speak about reconstruction of a war-torn, still country being torn by war, as Ukraine, we are really thinking out of the box of the money which is now in the European budget regarding external aid and external reconstruction efforts. So I don't really think there is a competition for funding, because in order to reconstruct Ukraine, we will need much more than there's there now in the NDG tool. We will need massive mobilization, which we haven't really seen since the end of Second World War, because that's an actual conventional war, and the effects are as such as were those in Second World War. So I don't really think there's a dilemma there's either or. I think the economic security of Western Balkans is in our geopolitical interests, and the fact that this is also heavily included in our political agenda, even if I'm being honest with you, it's not to the same degree as Ukraine. It's a commitment to the fact that it's a region which is close to us. It's the future of the EU. This is the natural reservoir of enlargement, if I may use it in this very strange language. So I think that it's also in the pipeline.
Thank you, Stefan. I saw the raising hands. We start with here, with Chloe, and then we go there.
Hi, my name is Chloe. I'm associated with the Young Thinkers at CEPS and the International Panel on Climate Change. I would like to ask my questions and connected with the events that CEPS held last week in the run-up of the Ideas Lab, where the High Representative Josep Borrell underscored the importance of building a strong narrative in order to improve the European foreign and security policy. The US, China, India, and Russia are all powers with very strong and clear narratives, when the European Union rather tends to solve political problems with new procedures, which do not capture the dreams and the emotions of its people at all. So arguably, as you say, this weird political animal, it's harder to build a strong narrative since member states have very different expectations and understanding of the European project. So my question is, do you concur with this need to rebuild or build a stronger European narrative? And how do you see your role as the European presidency more general in the articulation of national priorities and European strategies? Thank you.
Yes.
You pointed it yourself that if you compare the US or India and Russia and China with the EU, I don't think it's a fair comparison because we are not a state. If we are opt to become a United States of Europe, I don't think that we are there. Well, maybe it is something which will have to happen, but it's not an easy task to do, and it's definitely not on the plate of the Czech presidency. Sadly, this is the decade-long process. So, of course, the narratives, well, we have 27 member states. That means some 27 national cultures, 27 national political systems. It's the fact that this is a really weird animal between a sort of like international organization of a different kind, but it's not. I don't think that is necessarily on the in the to-do list for the EU to build a single narrative. But then, on the other hand, why we have a conflict between Russia and Ukraine in the first place is because Ukraine, the people of Ukraine wanted to be closer to the EU back in 2013 and 14, and it's not that they wanted to have NATO bases or something like the nonsense sprouting out of Moscow, but it's the fact that they wanted to be included into the EU economic and geopolitical sphere, and it was not welcome in Moscow. So this is the fact that there is an attraction in this model, the fact that so many countries are willing to become members of the EU. Well, one wanted not to become, or one wanted to leave, or that's sad to see them leave, but on the other hand, so many other countries are willing to join, that there is still an attractive story. And I think that, yeah, for the presidency, the fact that so many people are mobilized by the fact that the EU is helping Ukraine, it actually helps step by step to the fact of forging a bit more of a European demos in this way, even if we are still a long way ahead.
Thanks, Stefan. I think when we had you High Representative at CEPS, Steven was in the role of moderator, and I don't think you had the chance to share your feedback on what he said. So maybe this is the time.
Yeah, so this is revenge time. I thought it was a bit cheap from the High Representative, who is supported by a European External Action Service, who could take the initiative at weaving a narrative like that for us. I thought the member state-driven process, 2-year reflection period basically to come up with a strategic compass, was a missed opportunity to define what the EU's role as a military actor, security and military actor is in the world. Instead, it's a roadmap, basically a laundry list of commitments where the 27 member states have agreed to increase their capabilities. But it doesn't position the European Union in a more dangerous world. I agree, however, that there's a chance coming up in June 23rd, 24th, the European Council, to extend or to renew basically this strong narrative that the European Union is a zone of peace and prosperity, or at least can be, and that it is still attractive for countries in the neighborhood to join it. But then it needs to shed its strategic ambiguity, the European Union that is, vis-a-vis those countries. It needs to call a spade a spade. If it wants to live up to some geopolitical aspirations, then it should be able to define, who are friends and foes, to discriminate between them, and of course to draw boundaries in a way. And in that sense, that will not only apply to Ukraine. The risk is, of course, that because of so many differences of opinion between member states on the multitude of aspects on neighborhoods, the discussion will be restricted to Ukraine, leaving aside all of the other geopolitical issues and hot potatoes that need to be dealt with, the Western Balkans being one of them. These are communicating vessels. So the European Council has a task, and I think should be made more aware even than it may already be, although one key takeaway from me from today's event was basically the increasing frustration that the member states might not get their act together in a month's time to deliver that clear message. So if that is the case, then indeed, the next 3-4 weeks are everything to be played for in this particular sense.
Thank you, Stephen. And I saw the question down there.
Hello, Natasha Foote here. I'm an agri-food journalist with Euractiv. Listening to your priorities there, I didn't actually hear the word food or food security, which I found a little bit surprising considering the current circumstances. So I'm wondering why food security isn't higher up on the Czech presidency priorities, and maybe you could expand a little bit about your plans in the area of food and food security. Thank you.
Thanks. And let's also collect another question here, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you for all your efforts to discuss the priorities with us here together within an hour. My name is Christian Hanelt. I am from Bertelsmann Stiftung. I am the expert for the Middle East and North Africa region. I will not ask a question about the Middle East and North Africa, Stefan. I have a totally different question. I would like to know, when will be the euro the official currency of the Czech Republic? And please explain to us what are the sentiments of the Czech people towards the euro? Why were they so reluctant? And when will the currency come, the joint European currency? Thank you so much.
So thank you. About the food security question, you got us. It's actually when all the different government forums which are dealing with this paper were trying to figure out what the political priorities might be. That was one thing that we found out after the last draft was put to the ministers. Letterboxes, that this is an element which is missing. So what we are now doing, especially after the calling of the European Council of yesterday and the day before that, to include the food security question as not one of the big 5 priorities, but it's something which overlaps everything, because it's really the basic of the Maslow pyramid. If you don't have enough to eat, you just are not satisfied person in your life, and then everything can happen. So here I think what's within the remit of the EU presidency, it's not that we can save the situation in the whole world. What we can do is a multitude of simple steps, just like try to export all the grain and all the seed which is there in Ukraine to the places where it should be. It's a difficult task, but we've done worse, and we are able to mobilize all the resources we have, because we understand this is a potential of unraveling a much higher refugee and much higher security crisis that we are seeing right in Ukraine, being the fact that the crisis in Ukraine is quite big already. So also what we are trying to say, that we use the toolbox what we have right now. We have the common agriculture policy, which is hated by almost everybody. Well, not probably in the room, but which is a policy which has come under a lot of pressure. Me being, I wrote a diploma thesis on this policy, and I love it. I think the main element of that is that it's provided cheap and abundant food for the EU population. Let's use the fact that we have the policy right there. That's ready. There is enough funding. There's working methods are quite sound. Of course, it's expensive, but I think it's still cheap compared to the fact that there will be hundreds of millions of people around the world who will not have enough things to eat. So let's mobilize all the tools to expand as much foodstuff production as we can over the next couple of months, and to mobilize all the resources we have. And let's maybe forget for a while on farm to fork strategy, and don't tell it to Mr. Timmermans if he's in the room, but let's forget for couple of months, and let's mobilize the foodstuff production as much as we can. Regarding your question, well, right now it's used to be a political question, because the economic fundamentals of the Czech economy were there. Now it's an economic question back again. So we have 14% yearly inflation rate. We have interest rates which are definitely far beyond the Maastricht criteria. Our deficits are also far beyond. So now it's a question whether we want to make the euro as a sort of a political goal. There was not agreement in the coalition right now, so that was a lot of horse trading between this or there, which priority is there. I think the Czech citizen is not yet convinced on the benefits of the euro. With 14% yearly inflation, he will become convinced in a short time, and then the political narrative changes. Of course, that's the matter of having an independent national bank as well, but now we have very difficult macroeconomic situation, very difficult winter ahead, and I think that the elements of the political debate back in Czech Republic about the euro will change in a very, very short term, I think. It's not that I can promise you a date. We are not within the Maastricht criteria anyway, so it's not within this couple of years which are ahead, but maybe it's in foreseeable future within our reach, I would say.
Thanks a lot. I think we are nearly running out of our time, and instead of me wrapping up the session, let me use the final 5 minutes to come to the speakers again and to ask you to be very precise and brief and to basically try to respond the ultimate question we had. Peace and prosperity for all of Europe. In one word, you have basically 1 minute each of you. What do you think as the main opportunity to get there, if we can get there at all? Let's start with you, Stefan.
1 minute is very short, but I mean, this is an ambitious dream, but I think that we are all committed by the fact that we are still working within the European Union. We have disagreements on things we disagree natural because we are different people. There's 450 million of us, and there's 450 million of ideas, but the fact that we have a forum, that we have an arena where these ideas can be battled one against each other, the merits and the arguments, this is a very useful thing. That was pointed out here, that's the thing that the EU uses as sort of boring, faceless bureaucrats instead of tanks and missiles and bombing. And that's actually a huge benefit. Let's not really underestimate the value of the institutional framework, which everybody to a certain degree understands and follows the rules as a good benefit, as a good asset in this respect.
Institutional framework, assuming unanimity, is resolved. The way
Tricky one.
Steven?
Well, I think the membership applications by Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova actually give new momentum to a debate about deepening and widening of the European Union. You already see all kinds of suggestions being made left and right for escape routes, European political community à la Macron or European geopolitical community à la Michel. I think ultimately enlargement itself, and we mentioned this in the context of the stage accession process, actually provides an opportunity to renew the European Union through the back door. There's an accession treaty which would have to be signed if and when we get to that point with the Western Balkans, with the associated state or states, when the political decision is made. And that might be the first opportunity actually to review some of the treaties if we don't get into full convention mode and treaty reform as the European Parliament's Constitutional Affairs Committee has claimed for after the Conference of the Future of Europe ended with what was it, Sophia, 49 concrete recommendations? 49, yes. So the point would be peace and prosperity within Europe. Perhaps using this opportunity now to really, rethink some of the fundamentals for which we stand, and then implement them along the way. But if treaty reform is needed, then the accession treaty with the first entrant might be the first opportunity.
Thank you, Stephen. Celine?
Okay. Perhaps occupational hazard, but I'm going to go with climate justice on this one. I would perhaps in the EU context rephrase it as having a just transition, not just within the EU, but the role of the EU as a global actor in ensuring a just transition on the world stage, especially when one considers climate change as a threat amplifier relating to the peace dimension of it. But as you stated in your speech as well, with regards to prosperity, energy prices soaring, heat, food security, and also the contribution of energy prices to inflation as well, in the economic sense of it. I see it as a multifaceted issue that touches upon all these different areas. So I would say perhaps a just transition, broadly speaking.
Thank you, Celine. Kira?
I think history is very long, and when we talk about peace and prosperity, I think saying forever is a very long time. But I think that if peace and prosperity is going to be kind of a realistic dream, there are two things that we need to emphasize. One is the principles, exactly as we have said. What do we stand for, and ensuring that we really live by them? But the other one is ensuring citizen buy-in. And when we say all of Europe, it means that ensuring that nobody is left behind. And it's not just looking at economic inequality between countries, but also within countries. And I think that for me is a key takeaway of Brexit. And what happened is citizens who feel left behind and who don't feel represented by institutions can have serious repercussions for these projects. So I think that ensuring that we bring everybody along with the project as we look at enlargement is going to be really key to make this realistic.
Thank you, Kira. Let's go to Stella now.
Yeah, what wasn't mentioned was that I have a cultural background as well. So I'm going to tap into that and say that I think it's important that we lean into EU's motto of united in diversity and really embrace diversity and foster plurality of voices. Because I think that helps build bridges and understanding between our diverse countries and cultures and become more resilient as a result and more innovative and stronger as a region. So I really think the power of culture is often underestimated and we should really tap into that.
Georgi?
Thank you. Well, I can only agree and follow up to Stephen's point that end of the June, it's this watershed moment for the EU, which is declared geopolitical actor, to put its words into the action and not leave behind the countries like Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, and to have this old dream of Europe secure, united and in peace, finally including those countries, and for the rival powers like Russia to be denied the spheres of influence. That would be my point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this messages together all the discussion. Sums up, possibly we made it to somehow respond to this question within 1 hour, maybe impossible, but if it's not impossible, maybe we can get there too. So let me thank you all for being with us all day. Let me thank our young thinkers for being with us so engaged. Let me thanks to Stefan and Stephen for being with us. And let me thank also our online audience who was following our session on CEPS YouTube channel. And last but not the least, let me say special thanks to the great team of CEPS Young Thinkers initiative who made all this happen today. And let me also list their names: Tommaso Rosotti, Jane Aroy, Dylan Macchiarini-Crossan, Rosanna Fanny, Laura Nicolas, and Isabel Watson. Let's put our hands together for everyone. And with this, let me invite now to the stage our CEO, Karel Lanoux, for the final remarks.
Thank you, Tina. Thanks all of you for staying until the end. This was a revamp of our Ideas Lab, which started 9 years ago, when we're happy, let's say, we managed to do it in person again. But a shorter session than we used to do as Ideas Lab, but I think the momentum is there to start it again, and I feel there is a willingness to have debates again in person, and I think we desperately need it. And I think it was also very well done with these young thinkers to have young people, which is one of our hallmarks as a think tank, that we want to bring young people to the floor. But let me thank also the Czech presidency to be represented here. I think that was a very good combination, Stefan. Also, I appreciate a lot that you have the presidency now, because you bring a different flavor. And we have a bit of an East-West issue in Europe at the moment, but basically your priorities is started with the first one. Ukraine is a big priority, and everything which follows from this. Because I attended an event 2 weeks ago at the representation here in Brussels, where somebody said of your country, we have experience with tanks rolling in our country. So the focus of a country from the West is, as we've seen certainly after France, which has the presidency at the moment, will be different, and I think in the current circumstances is important. Also because, as you said, let's say the East is the future of Europe, and we have to see this as a geopolitical opportunity that we can expand towards the East. I mean, it's strengthened our rule of law, it's strengthened our values towards the East, I think, which we desperately need today. So thank you, Stefan, that you were with us and that you could kind of participate in this interaction with the young thinkers. As I said, the young thinkers was a great hallmark. Thank you also, Tina and Stephen, for participating in this session, which was very useful. As I said, you already made some thanks to the people who organized this. I have to do it from my side as well. Certainly to the person standing there. Izzy, if you come up, let's say we should certainly have to thank you, because you did a lot of the work. This Ideas Lab was organized at very short notice, so Izzy put it all together very rapidly. As you may imagine, there was this war in Ukraine. We had to adapt our program. We didn't know, let's say, whether we could meet in person, whether we find a venue, all these things. Izzy helped us all the way through, also with her team. Of course, there are many others which have worked with her like Xavier, or the two Xaviers, like Tina, like the new Laura. Let's say there is also Daniel who designed the program, and I think everybody of CEPS who put it all together. So a big thank you also to the sponsors. You see the names there. Let's say also that was brought together rapidly, but I think we can be proud that we have a rather large diversity of sponsors. Also the US mission to the EU, who helped us, let's say, to organize these debates with the Young Thinkers, who provided some support for that, but also the other thinkers like Bertelsmann Stiftung. Fantastic question, let's say, on the euro. It was a bit challenge, but it was a very good idea, let's say, to have this point, but also the European Investment Bank, European Parliament, EPRS, which is a kind of our big competitor in this town, because they're called the think tank of the European Parliament, but of course we are the independent think tank in this town. And then of course there is Deloitte. So it leaves me to invite you for drinks. We still have some way to try to keep you here. So if you could join us outside, let's say we can have a drink. And one of the main reasons for organizing this is networking. And that's what we've missed so much, I think, over the last 2 years. So with this, thank you very much and hope to see you again. And I hope, let's say, we can do this again next year, hopefully a 10th edition. Thank you very much.